The alert reached my phone while Vanessa was standing beneath a wall of white orchids, telling 200 people that Vera House had been built without shortcuts. New Lien activity detected on your property. I opened it because I thought it had to be a mistake. The address was ours. The amount was $150,000. The lender's name meant nothing to me, but the recording date did. A nightly county record refresh had found a document recorded 23 days earlier on a Tuesday when I had spent 10 hours reviewing catastrophic loss claims. And Daniel had texted that he was helping Vanessa with launch photos. I read the alert twice before I looked up. My husband stood at the edge of the stage holding a camera, smiling at his younger sister as though he had personally carried her company into existence. Vanessa wore cream silk and spoke in the polished, patient voice she used whenever she wanted debt to sound like momentum. Vera House is a fresh start, she said. No inherited burden, no compromises, no borrowed momentum. The word borrowed landed differently once I had a second lien on my house. A woman from a national boutique chain stepped away from the private buyer table and checked her phone. A man I recognized from the investor list leaned toward his counsel. Another person removed a printed card from the event program and folded it into his jacket. The changes were quiet enough that most guests kept watching the stage. Vanessa did too. She smiled through a presentation about resilience, while the lead investor's announcement disappeared from the run of show. A wholesale buyer closed her folder, and the company's payment processor placed launch settlements under risk review. The bankruptcy petition had appeared in the bankruptcy court's direct electronic docket less than an hour earlier. No one projected it on a screen. No one interrupted the live stream. No anonymous account exposed her. A due diligence provider monitoring Vanessa and her companies found the filing and sent the alert to the people who had been preparing to fund her. By the time Vanessa reached the slide describing Vera House as newly capitalized and free from legacy obligations, several people in the room knew the company had filed for reorganization. I still did not know that the lawyer who prepared that filing had been paid with money borrowed against my home. Daniel caught me leaving the ballroom. He stepped into the corridor and lowered his camera. "Where are you going?" I held up my phone. "Why is there a $150,000 lien on our house?" His eyes moved to the screen, then away from it. That movement answered more than any sentence could have. "It is temporary," he said. I waited. Vanessa needed bridge financing. The investor funds were supposed to close this week. "Did you borrow against the house?" "We borrowed against the house." "I did not sign a home equity loan." He glanced toward the ballroom doors. Applause rose inside as Vanessa moved into the product demonstration. "This is not the place." "Did you use my signature?" "The launch will repay it." That was not my question. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You would have said no before looking at the opportunity." "I did say no." "You said no 6 months ago, before there were real orders." "There are no real orders. The buyers are leaving." "That is because of the filing, not the brand. The filing is a restructuring tool. It will be repaid before you ever need to know." The sentence was so carefully wrong that I felt something inside me become precise. Not angry, precise. Daniel had not denied the loan. He had objected only to when I discovered it. "Do not contact the lender tonight," he said. "Vanessa still has an investor meeting." I moved past him. He caught my wrist for half a second, then released it when a hotel employee turned the corner. "Nora," I looked at him. "This can still work." I saved the title alert before I entered the elevator. By the time I reached the lobby, Daniel had sent 3 messages. The first said I was overreacting. The second said we would discuss it at home. The third said, "Do not contact the lender until Vanessa's investor meeting is finished." I forwarded the messages to a personal email account Daniel did not control. Then I called a hotel 2 miles away and booked a room. I did not return to the launch. That night, I pulled all 3 credit reports. A new hard inquiry appeared under my name. So did a $150,000 fixed-rate home equity loan. Its payment schedule showed the first installment due in 9 days, no delinquency had yet been reported, and the correspondence address belonged to Daniel's creative services company. I froze my credit files. I changed the passwords on my personal email, banking accounts, cloud storage, and the old family document account Daniel and I had once used for tax records. I enabled property alerts I should have activated months earlier. I downloaded every message in which I had refused to finance Vanessa's company. Then I called the lender's fraud department. The representative found my name in the account within seconds. According to the lender's system, I was a verified co-borrower. My social security number was correct. My employer was correct. My approximate salary was correct. The property insurance carrier and first mortgage information were correct. The email address was not mine. It used my maiden name and a number I had never used. The phone was not mine either. It was a prepaid number registered shortly before the application. The representative said all notices had been sent to those contacts. Did anyone ever call my actual number? No alternate number is listed. Did anyone mail anything to the house? The borrower correspondence preference is electronic. I wrote down the case number. The representative marked the account disputed, told me not to use the borrower portal created under the Alias email, and warned that the payment date would still arrive. Collection contacts directed at me could be paused, but the loan and recorded lien would remain in the system during the authorization review. That distinction frightened me more than a simple denial would have. The first mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and ordinary household costs still had to be paid. I moved enough money into my personal account to cover them, and documented the transfer, so Daniel could not describe it as an attempt to drain marital funds. I also requested copies of my recent consumer reports, rather than relying only on the score shown through my bank. The hard inquiry and new trade line appeared under my identity, but no late payment had yet been furnished. The timing gave us a narrow advantage. I had discovered the account before a missed installment became another fact requiring correction. The next morning, I filed an identity theft report and met with Camille Ross, a consumer and real estate attorney who had represented one of my colleagues in a title dispute. Camille did not promise that the lien would disappear. She did not tell me the lender would automatically believe me. She said the first task was to preserve every record before anyone could explain it away. The title alert tells us a document entered the public record, she said. The credit report tells us what the lender furnished under your identity. Neither one proves you authorized the transaction. I didn't. I believe you. The process still needs the file. She sent written preservation requests to the lender, the closing company, and the mobile notary identified on the recorded lien instrument. She asked the lender to pause collection activity attributable to me while the fraud review proceeded. She requested the application, authentication logs, closing package, disbursement instructions, and communications. Camille also ordered a complete title examination rather than relying on the monitoring alert. The title showed that Daniel and I held our principal residence as tenants by the entirety. The recorded junior mortgage contained a homestead waiver clause bearing both names, along with the lender, principal amount, legal description, and acknowledgement. Camille explained that the second signature was not ornamental. Illinois homestead protections could not be waived for one spouse merely because the other spouse signed. The closing file needed to appear as though both owners had joined in encumbering the home. The public record still did not show whether every internal closing condition had been satisfied, or whether the closing company had compared the borrower contact information against the first mortgage file. The closing company initially treated my complaint as a marital dispute. Camille corrected that immediately. A spouse disputing how money was spent is a marital issue, she wrote. A property owner denying execution and personal acknowledgement of a recorded security instrument is a title and authorization issue. That wording changed the response. The company preserved its intake checklist, identity copies, funding approval, correspondence, and closing instructions. It also notified its insurer without conceding liability. Then Camille asked how Daniel might have obtained my documents. I knew before she finished the question. 18 months earlier, Daniel and I had completed a legitimate modification of our first mortgage after our insurer delayed a large claim payment and my company changed payroll systems. The packet had included copies of my driver's license, tax returns, pay statements, property insurance records, and prior closing documents. Daniel had managed the physical file because I had been working 60-hour weeks. He had scanned everything. At the time, that had felt useful. I had not asked him to delete the copies after the modification closed. The old family document account still contained a folder named House, Final. Camille opened one of the legitimate modification documents beside a signature image from the new application. The copied signature matched exactly. Not generally, exactly. Same tilt, same tiny gap between my first and last name. Same broken stroke in the final letter. Someone pasted this image, she said. Several application pages used that copied signature. The security instrument recorded against the house was different. It contained a handwritten signature that looked enough like mine to pass at a glance, and wrong enough to make my skin tighten when I studied it. I always connected my middle initial to my last name. The signature on the lien separated them. I lifted the pen after the second letter of my first name. The forged signature did not. Camille arranged documented comparison samples, but reminded me that visual differences were one piece of the investigation, not the whole answer. The lender's audit trail arrived first. The application had been opened through sessions associated with Daniel's business environment. The Alias email received the verification links. The prepaid phone completed the one-time codes. My typed name appeared as co-borrower. The copied image was placed on electronic pages. No notice had gone to my real email. No code had gone to my real phone. The system had not failed because someone guessed a password. It had been built around contact channels created to keep me out of it. The closing file also contained electronic notices describing a 3-business-day right to cancel the transaction. The lender's system treated those notices as delivered to the Alias email and waited until the stated period expired before funding. They had never been delivered to me. Camille preserved alternative positions. I had never authorized the transaction. Even if the lender argued otherwise, the rescission period had not properly begun because the disclosures and cancellation notice never reached me. She preserved both arguments in writing without claiming that rescission would automatically reverse disbursements, erase the instrument, or decide how the lender recovered money already paid to third parties. Still, the audit trail did not identify the person sitting at the keyboard. It established the path. The recorded security instrument required more than electronic acceptance. It contained a notarized acknowledgement stating that Daniel and I had personally appeared before a mobile notary at Vanessa's showroom. I had been at work that day. My employer's building access records showed me entering at 7:38 in the morning and leaving at 6:12 that evening. My calendar showed 3 in-person meetings. A claims conference had placed me on camera with 6 colleagues at the exact time the notary journal said I appeared across town. The notary's journal listed my name, driver's license information, and a notation that borrower's signed package. The journal did not contain my actual signature. It contained a line completed by the notary. Daniel's signature appeared properly. Mine did not. The notary met Camille and the closing company's counsel for a recorded interview. She was not a mastermind. She was a woman who had accepted convenience over the most basic requirement of her role. Daniel had arrived at Vanessa's showroom with the package, copies of both IDs, and pages already bearing my name. He said I had signed earlier, but was stuck at work. He told the notary only his signature, and the remaining closing pages needed to be completed in person. The notary accepted that explanation. She copied my identification details into the journal and completed an acknowledgement stating that I had appeared. I understood they had already handled her portion electronically, she said. Camille asked, "Did you see Nora sign the lien instrument?" "No." "Did you speak with her?" "No." "Did she appear before you?" "No." The notary's answers mattered. They did not release the lien by themselves. The closing file showed additional failures. Electronic delivery was selected without anyone speaking to me. A quality control employee noticed that the email differed from our first mortgage records, but accepted Daniel's claim that I had changed it. The final confirmation call went to the prepaid number, and the checklist treated personal appearance as complete because the acknowledgement bore a notary seal. None of those errors proved that the closing staff knew Daniel was forging my name. They showed how several ordinary shortcuts aligned long enough for one person's false story to pass as a completed closing. The insurer's representative resisted any suggestion that the closing company should bear the entire loan balance. The lender had performed underwriting. The notary had certified personal appearance. Daniel had supplied false information. Vanessa's business had received the money. Each participant pointed to the next control in the chain. Camille did not argue that one failure caused everything. She argued that I should not remain the collateral for a chain of failures I had neither created nor approved. The lender still had money outstanding, a recorded instrument, a closing company, an insurer, a notary bond, Daniel's conduct, and a bankruptcy estate receiving most of the proceeds. The next record showed where every dollar went. $62,000 paid packaging, manufacturing, and fulfillment vendors for Vera House. $28,000 paid the launch venue, staging, lighting, and production. $19,000 paid influencer and public relations retainers. $17,000 paid creditors from Vanessa's previous business, Vanessa Veil Beauty. $9,000 paid bankruptcy counsel and filing-related retainers. $8,000 went to Daniel's creative services company. $7,000 paid Vanessa's personal credit cards and travel. The total was $150,000. Daniel had not only risked our house for his sister, he had paid himself from the proceeds. When I confronted him about the $8,000 through counsel, his attorney described it as legitimate creative work. That might have been true in the narrowest sense. Daniel had photographed products, designed launch visuals, and produced video content. What he had not done was disclose that his compensation came from a loan carrying my forged signature and secured by our home. The bankruptcy retainer changed the timeline. Vanessa and Daniel had not learned about the filing after the loan closed. They had been preparing for it before funding. Vera House's internal budget described a creditor containment phase beginning 2 weeks before the launch. A warehouse and fulfillment creditor had threatened to exercise remedies against inventory needed for the event. Old packaging vendors were unpaid. Chargebacks were rising. Tax payments were behind. The public investor deck portrayed Vera House as freshly funded, with no inherited liabilities burdening the operating company. The internal records showed a company dependent on immediate pre-order cash, wholesale deposits, and investor funding to replace the money taken from our house. The brand was also less new than Vanessa claimed. Product formulas, packaging components, customer lists, branding photography, and inventory had moved from Vanessa Veil Beauty into Vera House. Some transfers were documented. Others had no clear valuation or payment. Related companies can transfer assets lawfully. The problem was not the existence of continuity. The problem was presenting Vera House as a clean start, while old creditors, transferred assets, and unpaid obligations remained connected to it. Messages between Daniel and Vanessa made the pressure plain. Vanessa wrote, "If the warehouse moves before launch, we lose inventory." Daniel replied, "We need the house money first." She asked, "And if we have to file?" He answered, "File after funding. Once orders are real, Nora will see it worked." Another message said, "Use the old refinance packet. We cannot lose another week." The bankruptcy preparation file supplied the context those messages lacked. 3 weeks before the loan closed, Vanessa's warehouse creditor sent a default notice covering storage, fulfillment work, and inventory-related charges. The notice did not mean the creditor automatically owned every product in the warehouse. It did mean Vanessa could not assume the goods would remain available through launch night without resolving the dispute or obtaining bankruptcy protection. 11 days later, Vanessa's company signed an engagement letter with bankruptcy counsel. The first retainer invoice described emergency analysis of inventory claims, legacy company transfers, employee obligations, and a possible reorganization filing. Daniel received a copy of that invoice. He also received a cash forecast showing that Vera House could not pay the warehouse demand, complete the launch, and satisfy existing payroll and vendor obligations from available funds. The forecast contained 3 rescue assumptions. The home equity loan would fund production and hold the launch together. Wholesale deposits would arrive within a week of the event. Investor money and pre-order settlements would replace the loan proceeds before the first serious cash shortage became visible. None of those assumptions was guaranteed. The buyer had not signed an order. The investor's term sheet remained subject to diligence. The payment processor retained the right to delay settlements when a merchant entered bankruptcy or experienced an unusual increase in chargeback risk. Vanessa and Daniel had described all 3 sources as though they were scheduled deposits. Camille asked an accounting consultant to place the forecasts beside the loan closing and bankruptcy preparation dates. The result was not a dramatic hidden spreadsheet labeled fraud. It was a business plan with no margin for a refused loan, a delayed order, a processor reserve, or a creditor acting faster than expected. The launch had to happen on time. The loan had to close before I learned about it. The filing had to protect the inventory without frightening the buyers. New money had to arrive before old obligations caught up. That was why Daniel called my refusal a delay instead of an answer. The investor deck created another problem. One slide described Vera House as newly funded with no material legacy debt inside the operating company. A footnote referred generally to assets acquired from an earlier venture, but did not identify the unpaid vendors, warehouse dispute, transferred customer information, or the bankruptcy analysis already underway. Vanessa's attorney argued that the presentation was preliminary and intended to be supplemented during formal diligence. The potential investors' counsel answered that the launch program had included a planned funding announcement before that supplementation occurred. Neither position decided whether anyone committed securities fraud. They established why the investor paused. Marissa's wholesale team had a different concern. The proposed opening order required Vera House to warrant that it controlled the inventory, formulas, branding rights, and customer-facing assets needed to fill the order. The bankruptcy filing raised questions about which entity owned those assets and whether creditors could challenge the transfers. Marissa did not need to decide that Vanessa had lied. She needed assurance that her company would receive the goods it paid for without becoming part of a dispute among Vera House, Vanessa Vale Beauty, and unpaid vendors. That assurance did not exist on launch night. The more records we received, the less the loan looked like ordinary family support. It was the first domino in a sequence that required every later participant to act before receiving the complete picture. That was the sentence and the timeline that ended every possibility that Daniel had misunderstood my position. 6 months before the launch, he had asked me to consider using home equity for Vanessa. I had answered in writing, "Do not borrow against the house for Vanessa under any circumstances. I will not sign a home equity loan, pledge the house, or guarantee her company. If she provides full financial statements, I will review whether a small unsecured investment makes sense." Daniel had replied, "You never believe in anything until it is too late." Vanessa had seen screenshots of that exchange. She knew I had refused. The midpoint was not the forged signature. The midpoint was understanding what the forgery was designed to keep alive. Daniel had not mortgaged our home to support a promising new brand that needed one final push. He and Vanessa had used my equity to keep an insolvent operation alive long enough to look newly funded. The launch needed to produce immediate new money before I discovered the lien and before creditors acted against the inventory. The plan depended on replacing my home equity with investor, wholesale, and pre-order money quickly enough that everyone could call the original borrowing a bridge. A bridge is temporary only when both sides know they are standing on it. I had not even been told there was a river. From that point forward, 3 legal tracks moved beside one another. Camille handled the lender, title, identity, and closing failures. She did not advise Vera House on reorganization and did not control the divorce. My divorce attorney sought temporary rules for the house, valid mortgage payments, insurance, household accounts, and preservation of Daniel's business assets. She did not ask the Domestic Relations Court to declare the junior lien void before the lender and recorded documents were properly addressed. Bankruptcy counsel dealt with Vera House's creditors, schedules, transferred assets, insider payments, and possible reorganization. She did not represent Vanessa personally on the forgery allegations and did not represent Daniel. The separation frustrated Daniel because he could not solve one process by making a promise in another. Offering to make the loan payment did not correct the signature. Calling the money an investment did not amend the title record. Blaming bankruptcy for the failed launch did not explain why counsel had been retained before the loan closed. It also protected me. No single accusation had to carry the entire story. After the bankruptcy filing, Vanessa's attorney amended parts of the company's disclosures. The original schedules described the home equity proceeds as a family investment from the Whitman household. Daniel was listed as the primary contact, and I appeared as a possible co-investor. I had never agreed to invest. Camille sent formal notice disputing my consent and any characterization of me as an investor. Bankruptcy counsel represented Vera House, not me. Her job was to protect the debtor company's ability to reorganize and make accurate disclosures to the court. She corrected the schedules to identify the loan proceeds as disputed financing connected to Daniel and subject to claims by me, the lender, and other parties. That amendment did not decide the lien dispute. It stopped the bankruptcy record from turning Daniel's false story into an uncontested fact. Daniel's own legal position changed 4 times in 3 weeks. First, he said I had verbally agreed to support Vanessa. Then he said I had agreed to use some equity, though not necessarily $150,000. Then he claimed I had authorized him to complete routine paperwork. Then he said the house was marital property, and he believed my consent was implied. Camille asked his attorney for any document granting Daniel authority to sign my name. There was none. No power of attorney. No written authorization. No email approving a loan. No message saying he could borrow against the house. The only clear message was my refusal. Daniel then argued that I had benefited. Some of his $8,000 fee had entered a business account he occasionally used for household expenses. The home equity loan had temporarily paid launch costs that could have generated future income. That argument revealed how he understood consent. If I might benefit later, he believed he could decide now. Vanessa used a different defense. She said Daniel had assured her that spousal approval would be handled after funding. She insisted he, not she, created the borrower channel and signed my name. That distinction mattered. Vanessa did not personally forge every document. She did know I had refused. She introduced Daniel to the lender contact. She allowed the closing at her showroom. She received most of the money. She paid old creditors, bankruptcy counsel, and Daniel's company. She continued presenting Vera House as a clean, investment-ready company. She treated my consent as a problem Daniel would solve after the launch. The launch did not collapse in one dramatic moment. Guests still received gift boxes. Influencers still photographed the product wall. Vanessa still completed the live stream. But the financial center of the event disappeared. The investor announcement never happened. Marissa's wholesale team left without signing the opening order. Her company did not accuse Vanessa of fraud. It paused the transaction because its diligence team could not reconcile the newly filed schedules with the representations in the buyer materials. A sponsor suspended its endorsement pending review of product ownership and outstanding vendor claims. The payment processor held settlements rather than releasing launch proceeds on the normal schedule. That did not mean every pre-order was canceled or every dollar belonged to creditors. It meant Vanessa could not treat the evening's sales as immediately available rescue cash. 2 packaging vendors contacted bankruptcy counsel to determine whether goods displayed at the event had been paid for. The warehouse creditor asked whether inventory subject to its claim had been transferred to the venue. A beauty editor who had planned a favorable profile changed the article into a shorter report about the restructuring. Vanessa continued posting photographs from the event for 3 days. Every caption described the launch as a success. Success, in her version, meant the room had looked full. In the records, the company still could not meet obligations without money it had expected to receive from people who were now asking questions. Within 48 hours, the event that had been designed to prove Vanessa's success became evidence of how badly she needed immediate cash. Daniel called me from the house repeatedly. I did not answer. Did. I moved into a furnished apartment near my office and communicated through Camille and a divorce attorney. Our daughter Tessa called from college after Daniel told her I was trying to take the house and destroy Vanessa's company. I told her only what she needed to know. There is a loan I did not authorize, I said. Your aunt's company is in bankruptcy. Your father and I are separating. You do not need to gather information or carry messages. He keeps asking me to tell you he was trying to help the family. What did you say? That helping doesn't require using me as a messenger. I closed my eyes. You said exactly the right thing. Tessa did not become a witness. She did not search Daniel's office, record conversations, or choose a side for my benefit. She maintained whatever relationship she wanted with him under one condition. He did not use her to negotiate with me. Meanwhile, the lender's fraud investigator, Leonard Price, continued assembling the loan file. Leonard did not speak like a man deciding whether Daniel was evil. He spoke like someone separating what the lender could prove from what it suspected. The title record proved a lien instrument had been recorded. The credit report showed the lender had furnished an account under my identity. The application contained accurate information. The Alias email and prepaid phone showed communications were routed away from me. The e-sign trail showed sessions completed through Daniel's business environment. The copied signature image came from an older legitimate document. The wet signature on the security instrument did not match my normal execution pattern. The notary acknowledgement stated I appeared when independent records placed me at work. The notary admitted she never saw me. Daniel's messages instructed her that I had already signed. The disbursement ledger showed the money reached Vanessa, vendors, old creditors, bankruptcy counsel, Daniel, and Vanessa's personal cards. My written refusal predated the loan. No single record solved everything. Together, they left very little space for Daniel's version. The first scheduled installment came due while the investigation was still open. Daniel paid it from his business account after the lender warned that disputed authorization did not make the servicing calendar disappear. I continued paying the valid first mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and utilities from my own funds under temporary divorce arrangements. I did not pay the junior loan and then claim the payment proved consent. Daniel did not receive credit for protecting the house from a debt he had created. Every payment was coded and preserved without prejudice to the parties' positions. The house was not placed into immediate foreclosure. The lender had paused collection directed at me. Daniel was making the installments, and multiple parties were discussing a resolution. The risk was real, but it did not require inventing a 30-day countdown to losing the property. What it did create was paralysis. I could not refinance. I could not sell cleanly. I could not use the equity for an emergency without addressing the disputed lien. My financial security existed on paper, but was unavailable while Daniel called the loan temporary. He made a private offer before the coordinated mediation. He would make the monthly payments. He would return the $8,000 fee. Vanessa would repay him after reorganization. I would withdraw the identity theft allegation and describe the signatures as authorized through him. The lien would remain against the house until the loan was paid. In other words, Daniel offered to repair the payments while preserving the false history that created the debt. I rejected it. The lender agreed to pause collection activity directed at me during final settlement discussions, but it did not promise immediate release. Its money had funded real vendors and services. Some funds were gone. Some were inside a bankruptcy estate. Some potential responsibility rested with Daniel, the closing process, the notary, and the companies that ensured those functions. The night before mediation, I spread the records across the dining table in my temporary apartment. The valid first mortgage, the disputed junior lien, the application, the Alias email, the prepaid number, the e-sign report, the forged security instrument, the notary journal, the $150,000 ledger, the bankruptcy schedules, the investor deck, my refusal messages. I had spent 19 years believing that notarization, lender controls, and marriage created overlapping protection. They did not. Controls work only when people follow them. Marriage works only when consent is treated as a boundary rather than a delay. I also had mistakes to acknowledge. I had let Daniel keep the refinance packet. I had allowed him to manage household mortgage mail. I had ignored a reminder to activate county title monitoring. I had reused one password on an old family document account. I had dismissed Vanessa's financial problems as recurring family drama rather than a threat to my own assets. Those choices created access and delayed detection. They did not create authorization. Camille reminded me that the next day would not produce one perfect answer. The lender wants money and a defensible lien resolution, she said. The bankruptcy estate wants proper treatment of funds and transfers. The closing participants want defined exposure. Daniel wants to reduce personal responsibility. Vanessa wants her company to survive. Your divorce counsel wants to protect your share of marital property. Those interests overlap, but they are not the same. What should I want? You already know. I looked at the forged signature. I want the record to say I did not consent. And after that, I want the house released from the lien through a process that cannot be undone by another family story. The mediation took place at a neutral conference center near the courthouse. I sat beside Camille. Daniel sat across from me with his attorney. Vanessa had separate counsel. The lender's counsel sat beside Leonard Price. The closing company sent a representative and insurer. The notary appeared through her attorney and bond carrier. Vera House's bankruptcy lawyer attended with a representative responsible for protecting the debtor estate's interests. No one represented everyone. That was the first honest structure the transaction had ever had. Leonard began with the loan chronology. My correct identity information entered the application. The Alias email and prepaid phone received the confirmations. Electronic pages were accepted through sessions associated with Daniel's business environment. A copied signature image appeared on several documents. A handwritten signature appeared on the security instrument. I was at work when the notary acknowledgement said I personally appeared. The notary never saw me sign. Daniel's messages told her I had already signed and was unavailable. Funds went to Vera House, its vendors, old creditors, bankruptcy counsel, Daniel's company, and Vanessa's personal expenses. My written refusal existed months before the application. Daniel's attorney objected to the word forged. This is a settlement conference, not a criminal trial. Leonard nodded. That is why I am describing the records rather than assigning criminal guilt. The mediator turned to Daniel. Did Nora sign the security instrument? Daniel looked at me, then at the table. No. Did she authorize you in writing to sign for her? No. Did she tell you verbally that you could sign her name? Daniel hesitated. She knew we were considering equity. That was not the question. No. Who signed her name? Daniel's voice dropped. I did. No one reacted dramatically. The admission did not release the lien. It did not erase the money. It did not determine every insurer's responsibility. It established that the constructed borrower had never been me. Daniel said he believed the launch could not survive another delay. I was going to replace the money, he said. With what? Camille asked. Orders, investor funds, the wholesale deal. The bankruptcy representative opened a second timeline. Vanessa's old vendors were already unpaid. The warehouse creditor had threatened the inventory. The company had hired its restructuring lawyers before the home equity transaction funded. Loan proceeds paid legacy debts and filing retainers. The investor deck omitted material legacy exposure. The launch required immediate pre-order, wholesale, and investor money to replace the home equity proceeds. The initial bankruptcy schedules described the money as a family investment. Vanessa argued that the filing was a legitimate attempt to preserve value. Her bankruptcy lawyer agreed with the narrow point. A filing can be used to reorganize a distressed business. That alone was not misconduct. The problem was what Daniel and Vanessa knew when the loan was obtained, what they told the lender, what Vanessa told investors, and whose consent they invented. Daniel said the launch would have repaid everything if the filing had not frightened buyers. I spoke for the first time in nearly an hour. "You did not mortgage our home because her launch was succeeding," I said. "You mortgaged it because both of you already knew it wasn't." Daniel looked at me. Vanessa looked at the bankruptcy schedules. The mediator returned to the numbers. The lender had advanced $150,000. Some money had purchased real inventory and services. Some had paid old creditors. Some had funded bankruptcy preparation. Daniel had received $8,000. Vanessa had used $7,000 for personal cards and travel. Potential recovery existed through several sources, but not enough to pretend the lender could simply absorb the entire loss. Negotiations lasted 2 days and continued through written exchanges for several weeks. The difficult part was not agreeing that I had not signed. Daniel had admitted that. The difficult part was deciding who would absorb the loss created after $150,000 had already left the lender. The lender resisted releasing its collateral without replacement recovery. The closing insurer limited its position to process failures, the notary carrier relied on policy limits, and Vera House could not promise bankruptcy estate money without approval. Daniel had assets, but not $150,000 in cash. Camille built the resolution in layers. First came money still identifiable and available. Then Daniel's fee and saleable business property. Then insurer and bond contributions tied to documented closing failures. Then the treatment of claims and recoverable transfers through bankruptcy. Finally, Daniel's divorce allocation supplied additional value without assigning my separate earnings or valid share of the house to a debt I had rejected. Every contribution purchased a defined release. No party received a broader release than the money or obligation it actually resolved. My claims concerning false credit reporting, title correction, and unknown future consequences remained preserved until the corresponding actions were completed. The final framework did not give anyone everything. The lender's investigations supported removing me from borrower responsibility and correcting information furnished under my identity once the agreement was implemented. Daniel accepted primary repayment responsibility. He returned the $8,000 creative fee. He sold camera equipment, a leased studio package, and several business assets. A portion of his divorce allocation funded the settlement. The closing company and its insurer contributed based on documented failures in the closing process. The notary bond and insurer contributed within negotiated limits, without the notary admitting to knowledge of the larger scheme. Vera House recognized the disputed funds within the bankruptcy process. Traceable, unused amounts and certain recoverable transfers were credited according to court-approved treatment. Vanessa's personal card and travel payments became part of the insider transaction review. The junior lien was not erased by accusation. It was resolved through executed settlement documents, contributions from responsible sources, bankruptcy treatment, and a recorded release addressing my interest in the property. The lender preserved claims against Daniel and any parties not fully released. I preserved claims not expressly settled. Credit report disputes continued until the lender updated its furnished information, and the reporting companies reflected the correction. The divorce proceeded separately. Daniel was not left penniless. He remained employed. He kept some business equipment and enough assets to rebuild a smaller practice. He also left the marriage with obligations assigned to him because he had chosen to create them. Vanessa was not arrested at the launch. Vera House continued under bankruptcy supervision, while creditors, transferred assets, insider payments, and the possibility of reorganization were reviewed. The launch financing disappeared. The wholesale order did not return. The processor reserve remained in place for months. Her company might survive in a smaller form. It might liquidate. That decision belonged to the bankruptcy process, not to me. The house remained my home during the resolution, but my ownership interest did not feel secure until the recorded release appeared. 10 months after the launch, I sat at a closing table with a small stack of documents in front of me. The divorce property agreement had been completed. The junior lien release had been recorded. My credit reports no longer treated the home equity loan as an obligation I had accepted. I had chosen to refinance the valid first mortgage into my name alone. The closing attorney began with the title report. She showed me the valid first mortgage, the ownership record, and the disputed junior mortgage marked released and no longer outstanding. The release matched the correct recording number and legal description. It left the historical filing in the chain of title, but ended its enforceability. I compared the title report with the county record on my own tablet. The entries matched. Then she reviewed the new loan terms. She did not slide pages toward me while talking about something else. She did not say the documents were standard and point only to the signature line. She explained the rate, payment, escrow, insurance requirements, and the conditions under which the lender could enforce the valid mortgage. I read every page. No one rushed me. No one told me it was merely paperwork. When I reached the signature page, I stopped. The line was empty. My full legal name appeared beneath it, waiting for the only thing Daniel had believed he could manufacture: consent. I signed once. The closing attorney watched me sign, verified my identification, and notarized the document. It felt nothing like the months required to repair the signature Daniel had created. At home, I placed the closing package in a locked cabinet beside the county title confirmation and the credit report correction. Daniel had treated my signature as the smallest part of the transaction, a final administrative step he could manufacture with an old document, an imitation, and someone willing to accept his explanation. He had been wrong. The signature was the decision. The house was not unused capital. It was years of payments, repairs, insurance premiums, and choices we had once made together. Vanessa's launch had been built to look new. The loan had been built to look consensual. Both failed when the records were placed in the correct order. Tessa came home from college that weekend. She stood in the kitchen and asked whether the house felt different with Daniel gone. "Yes," I said. "Better? More accurate," she smiled. "That sounds like you." We ordered dinner and ate at the same table where Daniel had once spread Vanessa's brochures and called our equity a backup fund. Later, Tessa asked whether I hated him. I thought about the forged signature, the false borrower account, the notary journal, and the version of our marriage Daniel had tried to write around my refusal. "No," I said, "but I believe him now." After she went upstairs, I opened the cabinet one last time. The recorded release rested beneath the new mortgage package. One documented the lien Daniel created without my permission, and the release that ended it. The other recorded terms I had read, understood, and chosen for myself. I locked the cabinet, carried Tessa's empty teacup to the kitchen, and moved one of her sneakers out of the hallway. The house was quiet. Not empty, not waiting for someone else to decide what should happen inside it. I turned off the downstairs lights and went upstairs without opening the cabinet again. For the first time in almost a year, no enforceable lien remained against my home that I had not personally agreed to. And for the first time in 19 years, neither did the marriage. If someone you loved forged your signature, risked your home, and later repaid every dollar, would the money be enough for you to forgive them? Or is consent the one thing repayment can never restore? What would you have done in Nora's place? Accepted Daniel's promise to keep paying, or fought until the unauthorized lien was removed? And let me know where you are listening from tonight. Your city, your state, or your country. For more stories of family betrayal, hidden financial secrets, quiet strength, and earned justice, subscribe and stay with us. Another story about someone choosing their own future over a family lie is already waiting. I will see you in the next one.